The man freezes. The photo in the doctor's hand shows two kids, twins, but they vanished 18 years ago with his wife. Comment where you're watching from, and tell me, what would you do if this happened to you? Enjoy the story. Can you imagine losing your entire family in a single day? Keep listening to African Legacy Tales to uncover the mystery. Steve McGovern stared at the weathered newspaper clipping in his hands, his vision blurring with unshed tears. 18 years had passed since that day, the day his wife and their 6-month-old twins had vanished during what was supposed to be a short boat trip along the coast. The headlines still haunted him: mother and infant twins missing after boating accident. What would make a mother disappear with her children? The question had consumed him for nearly 2 decades, becoming both his torture and his purpose. The salty air from the open window carried the scent of the same ocean that had taken them, the irony not lost on Steve as he sat in his coastal home office. The rhythmic crashing of waves against the shore provided a constant reminder of what he'd lost. He could almost taste the salt on his lips, feel the roughness of the wooden deck beneath his feet from that last day he saw them. The familiar walls of his office were covered with maps, notes, and photographs, a physical manifestation of his obsession. Outside, the coastal town of Millport continued its everyday life, oblivious to his renewed determination. Something had changed today. After years of dead ends, he finally had a lead. Steve had never accepted the official explanation: a sudden storm, an inexperienced sailor, a tragic accident. It was all too convenient, too neat. Yvette was cautious, methodical. She wouldn't have taken the twins out if there was any risk. And where was the wreckage? Why had no bodies ever been recovered? The twins, Adam and Lucille, had been a miracle, conceived through their third and final attempt at in vitro fertilization. The fertility treatments had depleted their savings, but when Yvette held those babies in her arms, she'd told Steve it was worth every penny, every injection, every disappointment. The fact that the twins had been born with much darker skin than either parent had been a surprise, a rare genetic occurrence their doctor had explained, possibly from distant ancestry. Steve remembered how Yvette had fiercely defended their children against the questioning looks, the whispers, the assumptions about their parentage. "They're ours," she would say firmly. "That's all anyone needs to know." His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his phone vibrating against the desk. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. McGovern," a woman's voice asked when he answered. "Speaking. My name is Dr. Layla Patel. I'm a transplant specialist at Mercy General Hospital." She paused momentarily. "I believe I may have information about your wife and children." Steve's heart hammered against his ribs. In 18 years, he'd received countless calls from psychics, conspiracy theorists, and well-meaning but misguided individuals claiming to have seen Yvette and the twins. None had ever panned out. "What kind of information?" he asked cautiously, trying to keep his voice steady. "This is rather complicated, and not something I should discuss over the phone. Would you be willing to meet me at the hospital tomorrow morning? I have a patient, a young man, needing a kidney transplant. There's something about his case that, well, it might be connected to your family." Steve's mind raced through possibilities. Could one of the twins be sick? Could they have been alive all this time? "I'll be there at 8, he said, already reaching for his calendar to clear his schedule. As chief financial officer of a mid-sized investment firm, he had meetings lined up tomorrow, but nothing that couldn't be rescheduled. "Thank you, Mr. McGovern. I'll meet you in the lobby." After hanging up, Steve pulled open his desk drawer and removed a framed photograph, the last picture taken of Yvette with the twins. Her auburn hair caught the sunlight, her green eyes sparkling as she held the babies, one in each arm. Despite the exhaustion evident on her face, she radiated happiness. What had happened after this picture was taken? What had made her take that boat out on what had seemed like a perfect summer day? The Coast Guard search had turned up nothing, not the boat, not any debris, not a single trace of his family. As evening fell, Steve drove to the marina where Yvette had last been seen. He'd done this countless times over the years, walking the same path she must have taken, trying to understand. The harbor master, now retired, had sworn that Yvette had seemed completely normal that day, happy even. She'd mentioned taking the twins to see the lighthouse just up the coast, a 20-minute trip at most. Steve stood at the end of the dock, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Tomorrow, for the first time in 18 years, he might finally get answers. The thought both terrified and electrified him. Back at home, he couldn't sleep. Instead, he'd pulled out the files he'd collected over the years, witness statements, weather reports, the Coast Guard search patterns. None of it added up. There was something else, something he'd missed. Opening his laptop, he searched for information on Dr. Layla Patel. Her professional profile showed an impressive career, Harvard Medical School, numerous published papers on organ transplantation, and a specialty in genetic markers and compatibility. Why would a transplant specialist be contacting him about his missing family? As he scrolled through her recent publications, one title caught his eye: Genetic Anomalies in Transplant Rejection, Case Studies in Identical Twins. The article was behind a paywall, but the abstract mentioned how certain genetic markers could reveal previously unknown biological relationships. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Mr. McGovern, before our meeting tomorrow, you should know that what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about your family. Dr. Patel. Steve stared at the message, a chill running down his spine. What could she possibly know that would change everything? And if one of the twins was at her hospital, where had they been for the past 18 years? Where was Yvette? And what about the other twin? Most importantly, if they were alive, why had they never come home? Steve arrived at Mercy General Hospital 15 minutes early, his night of restless speculation leaving dark circles under his eyes. The hospital lobby buzzed with the usual morning activity: nurses changing shifts, visitors clutching coffee cups, patients waiting anxiously for appointments. The antiseptic smell and fluorescent lighting heightened his sense of unreality. Mr. McGovern? He turned to see a woman in her late 40s, her dark hair threaded with silver, wearing a white coat with Dr. Layla Patel, Transplantation Medicine embroidered on the pocket. "Thank you for coming," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, but her eyes held a compassion that made Steve uneasy, the look doctors reserved for delivering difficult news. "You said you have information about my family," Steve said, skipping the pleasantries. 18 years of waiting had eroded his patience. Dr. Patel nodded. "Let's talk in my office." As they walked through the hospital corridors, Steve noted the organized chaos of a busy medical center: nurses reviewing charts, orderlies pushing gurneys, the occasional urgent call over the intercom. The normalcy of it all stood in stark contrast to the turmoil inside him. Dr. Patel's office was small but meticulously organized. Diplomas and certifications covered one wall, while family photos occupied another. She gestured for Steve to sit as she closed the door. 6 weeks ago, she began, a young man named Ted Johnson was admitted to our emergency department with acute kidney failure. His condition required immediate dialysis while we evaluated him for transplantation. Steve nodded, trying to understand the connection to his family. During our standard genetic testing for transplant compatibility, we discovered something unusual, Dr. Patel continued. Ted's genetic profile indicated a direct familial relationship to a patient in our database, a young woman named Lucille Williams, who received a bone marrow transplant here 3 years ago. Steve felt the air leave his lungs. Lucille, his daughter's name. Further testing confirmed their siblings, identical twins, in fact, Dr. Patel said gently. When I saw their birth date and the unusual genetic markers they share,